Welcome to the Rev and the Rav, a program of interreligious discovery and exploration. My name is Rabbi Danny Lehmann, president of Hebrew College.
And I'm Nick Carter, president of Andover Newton Theological School.
Today we're going to discuss the recent tragedies here in Boston after the Boston Marathon bombings, and in particular the interfaith challenges that these tragedies present to us in the Boston community especially. First, we're going to focus on the interfaith service that took place last week at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross in the south end of Boston. My friend Nick Carter was there at the service and was involved in the planning of the program. Unfortunately, I was unable to be there, having other obligations that I had to attend, and I felt bad that I wasn't able to participate. But I'm curious about what your experience was being there, what the nature of the interfaith gathering was, and a little bit about what was involved in the planning.
Well, Danny, of course, we have to begin by acknowledging what a tragedy this is for our community. And as I know you've expressed your concern and sadness and grief for the families that are impacted, and we do all of this discussion and reflection in that context of sympathy and concern for all of the folks that were involved. When tragedies like this happen, it's a surprising phenomenon of what evolves within the religious community in its attempts to respond, because we all have a pastoral concern, and we have a concern both for the communities that we're a part of as congregations, but the larger our community process their feelings and grieve. And there's a lot of work that goes into that, the bigger the scale.
Right. Here on the Hill we had a gathering,
yes,
an interfaith gathering last week in order to begin that process for our two schools and the communities that we represent.
Yes, and I think that's one of our responsibilities is to respond as quickly as we can to do that. Normally, our services get a chance to go through a lot of planning and a lot of thought in advance. But these difficult moments do come upon us, and we're not afforded a great opportunity to reflect on the service itself. And there's quite a bit of honest scrambling that goes on.
Sure.
This service in particular was one where I started to receive quite a few emails, largely because of work we had done on the 9/11 service for the Boston community, and some of those same people started to email me saying we ought to do something, and I then put out a sort of an all-points bulletin that said, all right, let's use our conference call capability. Here's the number. You all dial in. And contact others in the community that you think should be a part of this planning service, and we'll see what we can do. And it emerged pretty quickly that we wanted to have a joint service. But one of the participants in that process had already been contacted by the governor. And the governor had said, I'd like to have a service. Could you work with the religious community to do this? So from the beginning, we were connected to the governor's office.
And was from that point on the governor and the governor's office serving as the host or the?
Well, we weren't quite sure as we tried to define. We were pleased that the governor was in at the beginning,
right,
because other services we had to knock at the door of the governor's office.
Right.
This one, the governor had offered some initiative, and we were deeply appreciative of that.
And it was more the governor's office than the mayor's office.
Yes. And we were trying to sort through initially, well, who's on first and who's making the calls here. But the word came to our group that please design a service.
Right.
So we went to work in designing a service and really tried to work hard to make it an inclusive service, a truly interfaith service of all the different religious groups. And
was the Cathedral of the Holy Cross chosen because of its size, its location,
interestingly,
the Catholic community's significance in Boston?
no, the Catholic community was involved from the beginning in the planning, but they were quite gracious in terms of the choice of a site. Initially, the governor had an idea of where he'd like to have the service, which we gave serious feedback that it was way too small. That was a size concern. Symbolically, we really wanted to have it either at Old South or Trinity, right there on Copley Square. But because of security issues and police investigation, that was not possible. Then it didn't take us long to realize that this service was going to turn out quite a crowd.
Right.
We recognized that for security reasons, we also couldn't have a service outdoors. And so then it became, well, what are the biggest places you could have a service? You could have the Christian Science Mother Church, a few others, but of course then the cathedral emerged. And word came that, because right in the midst of that decision, word came that President Obama was going to come. And then security issues were tripled.
Right.
And it really became clear that the choice of the cathedral was the best place all the way around. It seats 2,500. The security is quite easy. It's away from Copley. But then that changed several of the dynamics. The cathedral is the home church of the cardinal. And so the cardinal becomes the host.
Right.
And his protocols and opinions and respect for his position start to play a role in all of that. So there was this dynamic of changes that came both from the governor's office, from the president's office, from the cardinal's office, and then with that came the introduction of television and timing. And we had put together a service that we thought would last about an hour before we heard the president was coming.
So what was it like to be there from the perspective of someone who's so engaged as you are with interfaith relations? What was it like as an interfaith experience?
Well, you know, this is, there are two levels of this. One is our original commitment to try and help the community grieve. And I think as a whole, the service was really a good one. That I thought each of the politicians spoke eloquently, each in their different perspective. But I give them a lot of credit because often they bumble their way through this or they make it overly political. And I think that the three political officials, the mayor, the governor, and the president, were eloquent. And I thought that the religious leaders who participated did a good job. And when you think about it, it was men and women, black, white, Hispanic, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Orthodox, Protestant, Catholic. That's pretty good. Now, there were some important parts of our interfaith community that were not part of the final service, but they were part of the original plan. Unitarians, Christian Science, the Sikhs.
Right, it's hard to subdivide it.
Right, and they were originally part of the plan, but both, for some reasons I don't even completely understand. The governor's office, perhaps the mayor, perhaps I don't know the inner thing. Finally, just simply said we can't have all those people be a part of it, and so that was a disappointment. It was behind the scenes. For the public, I thought it was a good service.
Yeah, I actually watched it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I thought Liz Walker did a wonderful job introducing it and giving it that interfaith framework.
Right.
And I thought it was actually important that she said, within this interfaith context, I, of course, referring to herself, invoked the name of Jesus, but she did it in a way that acknowledged the fact that that was her way of engaging God, but that there were others represented in the room. So I thought she did a very nice job.
Liz, I think she deserves an enormous amount of credit. She was the key player in all this between the governor's office and the religious community. She really has emerged as one of the most important religious leaders in the Boston community, and she's studying to be ordained in the Presbyterian tradition, And her presence there was so important on so many levels. She was just a fine, fine leader, and I think she modeled for a lot of us that language of engaging others is being clear about who you are and being unapologetic.
Right. I thought that was very significant.
But allowing room for not everyone is like me.
Right.
And I thought that was good. I thought Nancy Taylor was eloquent. All the participants I thought did a good job.
And now that it's slowly emerging that the suspects who are at the center of this tragedy and the violence may have been motivated by their own commitment to a brand of Islam that calls for jihad and this kind of violence, that they may have even be influenced by jihadist groups on the internet or some kind of radicalization process that they undertook here in the United States. How is that going to create new challenges for us in Boston as we continue this work of trying to heal the community since 9/11 and ramp up our interfaith efforts?
Well, Danny, you and I have talked about this at some length, even as sort of an ongoing dialogue, and our dialogue with members of the Muslim community, for whom I have a great deal of compassion at this point. That when these players act and then say that they act in the name of Islam, it's a huge and difficult, sad challenge for the Muslim community to then bear that for any one of us, when we have radical members of our own faith traditions who do things that we find abhorrent, that we have to take that in, that because people claim our tradition for the reason
Right.
for doing it.
I remember that process that many in the Jewish community were faced with after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, which was done by a person who was acting from a perspective of religious extremism.
Yeah, and so I have an enormous amount of compassion and concern for the Islamic community in Boston, and I think we've got a lot of work to do here as we begin to sort this through, particularly with these two young men who I think all indications are we're self-radicalizing. There may be other things that are discovered along the way, and it's hard to speak categorically about all that, but the early evidence seems that they were self-radicalizing. It was something they learned on the internet, that they were, in many ways, they were people who they were terrorists who happened to be Muslims as opposed to Muslims who were therefore terrorists. And I think that's a very important distinction. It's by all evidence, they came late to their Islamic awareness. And and in many cases, we've often seen this from Al-Qaeda all the way through, that they often will distort some fundamental teachings of Islam, and that we struggle with that with Christians, who there are terrorists, domestic terrorists, who claim Christianity is the reason for acting, and they distort the gospel.
It's still the case across religions that these extreme and radicalized forms of religious influence are in fact major causes for this kind of terrorist violence. So, in terms of the kind of work we have to do within the religious communities that we inhabit, it seems to me that there is a significant challenge to figure out how we address our own religious tendencies towards these violent, radical moves that people make.
Sure. I think our first responsibility is always to our own community, to examine what leads people to extreme actions, particularly violence, and owning up to that conclusion that people take from each of our own traditions that leads them to violence. And I think that that's an ongoing challenge for each of us. Then secondarily, there becomes, within the larger interfaith community, the degree to which we can support each other as we struggle with this. And to recognize that it is a sad but universal phenomenon. And how do we build a community that makes room for each tradition to deal with it on their own, on the other hand, supports them, particularly the vast majority of folks who are not radicalized, who are not extremists, and allow them to participate fully in society and to have all the rights and privileges of our society. I think that that's a critical challenge.
Right. And that is the challenge that both of our institutions will undertake and continue to work on in the months and years ahead as a part of our commitment to interfaith discovery, dialogue, discussion, and hopefully the healing that will come from the efforts that our schools and our broader community will make towards a better world where our faiths can contribute to peace. Shalom. I'm Rabbi Danny Lehmann from Hebrew College.
I'm Nick Carter from Andover Newton Theological School. Peace.